starting. Bam. That's how we roll.
Hi, Melanie Curtis.
Yes. Hi, Pamela Gold.
With lighting.
Yes.
Every now and then I'll be able to be in my home. Every now and then. Okay, when I'm not, because I'm not vain. And if I look all dark and funny, that's fine too.
It's all good. It's all about the conversation. My guess is people will likely listen to this, audio only a lot of times. And that's cool too. Sort of like a podcast option for a video or podcast.
This isn't about us. And both of us, I think one of our areas of opportunity, since we're talking about ego today.
Yes.
To think about how we kind of deal with our self-promotion and our aversion to ego.
Yep.
And that is, what we're going to talk about today. So it's kind
of
a perfect segue.
It's a definite, I see, that's so weird how it alters the view. I don't get technology.
Anyway.
Again, it doesn't matter. So let's start with that actually, Pam, about like, how do you define or explain ego to other people?
Sure. So the way that I usually define ego is I say that it is any idea about ourself, like thinking about who we are, and any kind of label, any kind of like outside in and kind of inside our head idea about who and what we are. So, in my life, it has been a constant kind of like, who am I? Right? Like I remember being like little, being like, who am I? And, your brain is like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to like label myself. I'm going to figure out who I am.
Yeah.
But as long as we are either thinking about how we identify ourselves to others and how we identify ourselves, with our own kind of labels for ourselves, that's all ego. Like that's like our identity of like who we are to others, labeling of ourselves. That's all ego. When we're in that kind of, rat race, kind of hamster wheel, kind of, who am I? Well, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. Now I'm an author. I was an executive, all of that stuff. That's all ego. And the problem with that is when we're in that part of kind of identifying ourselves, we're not actually connecting with being who we really are. It's like we're in our head about who we are. And it may feel true or whatever, but it's all temporary, right? Like our ego is always these like temporary labels.
Yeah.
But who we really are, when we feel it, when we're being it, there's no labeling of that. There's no perception of that. You're actually just being it. And it's like, doesn't make any sense. Like if you're actually, this is a whole challenge, right? Like when you're in your head, it makes no fucking sense of like, what the, like, what are you talking about, Pam? But it's something that you can feel, kind of like the space between your thoughts. When you're being that, that's who you are. And your ego is everything else. Like literally, your ego is everything else. And there's layers upon layers upon layers of it. And it's the shedding of that that actually is clarifying our brilliance and our authenticity of being who we are without getting caught in those labels. And like, well, am I good enough? Am I a good enough mom? Am I a good enough writer? Am I a good enough worker? Am I good enough whatever? And that's where we get stuck in the kind of the fear, kind of disillusion or, illusion of who we and what we really are.
Yeah.
Any of that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it sounds strange, but it's almost without language, like a complete disassociation from language, which is an interesting distinction, the whole like assigning meaning versus like, and if we talk about spiritual, we were starting to talk about that last week. You were touching on that. I tend to think of like without ego as like this, and again, it's hard to even talk about this, but like
words are limiting,
defining it, in words, but if in so doing, because we're in conversation in words now, just sit here and be all fucking enlightened because whatever.
Oh,
look. This is what it is.
It's me. I'm me.
We'll sit here and be silent.
Yeah.
No, but like, I feel like there's like this transcendence from language, as it were. And that's a buzzword in itself, transcendence and stuff, like as if we're out of this world. But I feel like there is sort of this, when we get out of language, when we get out of defining things, and it's a presence, like very present, connected to the bigger
And flow, right?
bigger
Flowing, like we're in the
flow and
flow
bigger
and
energy of life, bigger, like no meaning, no fear, no need, no, and it's like the shedding of everything, I feel like. And
mhm,
if I had to describe it in words, to be like egoless,
mhm.
you know, is that there isn't, like you say, no, there are no labels, there's no language. So it's tough to even describe it. Like and I don't feel like, because I do an assessment with people talking about energy and how we assess, like it's a way to give language to these, like, I think layers of presence and
Mhm.
peace and shedding of ego and stuff like that, and helps us identify them in words without labeling. And anyway, I'm sort of rambling on this, but
I'm feeling you.
yeah, like it's the with, I don't know, I keep without definition, like there aren't really words for it, but
Mhm.
I feel like some people have felt this
Mhm.
and some people have not, and I
Mhm.
don't say that as a exclusionary distinction is what I mean. So when I'm doing the assessment, some people can identify with those higher levels of energy and bliss and
Awareness, right?
transcendence and self-awareness, and other people can't. Not to say that's bad,
No, it's just
just
where
to
they
say
are.
they haven't had an experience that maybe feels like that, or that they would describe in the way I describe it. Does that
And I like, yeah, it totally makes sense. And I like using analogies because oftentimes, we're talking about such abstract things that, again, words
yeah.
are never going to hit the nail on the head when we're thinking about what the words really mean in our head. But if we're feeling the words in our heart, you can kind of
Hmm.
feel what we're talking about, right? And so I
Yeah.
like analogies because it helps crystallize. Like one analogy is almost like the blossoming of a flower. Like
Hmm.
at no point is the flower better or worse, right? But like at one point it's just a bud and then it starts to open and it starts to open. And then like at some point it's at its fullest
Hmm.
blossom and then it starts to die, right? And it's all a cycle. So there's no like better or worse at any part.
Right.
There's a part where it's like manifesting the kind of highest level of its beauty, but
Hmm.
like it's always a flower and the potential's there and it's awesome. And it's kind of like that too, like in our kind of being. And we all, I mean, personally, I experience it because lots of times I get stuck in the logistics of life and like, where am
Sure.
I going to be? And I'm in my head kind of planning, right? And in
Absolutely.
that moment, I'm not like necessarily kind of in touch with kind of my deeper flow.
Definitely.
And it's tricky. And like sometimes, and when I'm in that place, I'm much more likely to get triggered. Like last week when we were talking about taking things personally,
Yep.
I'm much more likely to get irritated, to get annoyed when I'm in
Definitely.
that kind of state, as
Definitely.
opposed to in a state where I'm feeling so kind of connected with,
Yeah.
this deeper being of,
Hmm.
who I am, where I'm not, thinking about things and I'm not thinking about whether I'm good enough. And I'm sure you've had the experience too. Like there's been times when I've been in mid conversation and I'm like flowing and I'm like sharing some really deep, brilliant stuff. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, my brain will kick in and be like, are you making any sense? And then I'll be like, I don't know, am I making any sense? And then I'll have like this kind of like, and I'll lose my flow because I'll get like
Hmm.
this triggered response of like fear of like, wait, am I making any sense? Like,
Yeah.
is this
How
person
are
getting
they
me at
receiving this?
all?
Yeah. Like,
Right?
yeah. Do they get me? Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, and I'll lose the flow because I'm getting back into my ego. And
Yes.
because of that, I have an aversion to anything ego related because I know when I'm in my ego, I'm not in touch with my best, kind of highest, most brilliant, deepest wisdom self.
Hmm.
And so I have a fear that I'm trying to work through around like self promotion because doing these videos,
Yep.
it's hard to not see it from other people's eyes like, oh, there's Pam on video again, like,
Yeah.
but it's not about
Oh,
me, it's
I
about
get
the work,
it.
right? So you and I have talked about this many times and I think it's a
Yeah.
great thing to talk about when we're talking about ego,
Hmm.
because you and I both have an aversion to anything that is ego related because we've experienced how when we're in our ego we lose our brilliance, like we really
Yeah.
do. And so we don't want to go there, but yet we have to do what seems from the outside in to be ego driven,
Right.
to do this work and to share what we're trying to share to make the world a better place.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like anything ego, like ego driven, as it were, has an exclusionary nature to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's funny, the skydiving thing is a good parallel. Like, there's this joke about like sky gods and stuff like that. sky gods, which is basically like the person who thinks they're really good at skydiving, who thinks that puts them above other people.
Mm,
Like it's such a not cool thing.
hmm
So like I'm way anti sort of sky god mentality
hmm
because of that exclusionary nature. So that's why like that's why I'm so, when I even was describing just now, like this idea of having sort of a more transcendent experience,
Yep.
having had that or not having had that of for yourself
Right.
does not mean anything good or bad or anything,
Right.
so that I always want to make sure
Yeah, because the
when,
ego compares, right? Like
yeah, like
the
I don't
ego
want people to
compares.
feel judged and
Right.
feel excluded because they don't identify with the words I'm using or whatever,
Right. I think
you
that's
know?
an awesome, a really important point when we're talking about the ego. Like the ego is the part that judges. The ego is the part that compares because
Yes.
it's trying to feel good enough. It's trying to like feel validated that this
Hmm.
concept of myself, which is separate from everybody else, is good enough.
Right.
And that's your ego at work. And so
Yeah.
whenever I catch my brain doing any of that, either comparing myself to someone else or any concept around deserving or
Hmm.
fair, those are ego words, right? And it's so important because now I recognize if I have any kind of thought around fairness, any kind of thought around deserving, any kind of thought around comparing, any
Hmm.
kind of thought around blaming, all of that is always from the ego because that's the basis of like me and all the others.
Hmm.
And it's that separateness that our
Separateness.
ego identifies with and judges based on.
Yeah.
And it's not, none of that is true. And that's what's so important. Like you and I have, talked about this before, and both of us embrace this concept that this separateness is an illusion that really,
That's the
really,
quote
I
I
know that's the
used
quote you
of
put in your book.
yours
I
in
know.
my
I
book.
was like, oh,
That,
um,
because I was like, I was really looked just as an aside, just
yeah,
to acknowledge that quote and you for that, is that I was trying to figure out, because I wanted to include your wisdom in my book,
thank you.
but I was like, there was another one that I was considering, but I'm like, that's not really Pam. And again, it's comical
I
that
know.
we're talking about
Pam. That's not Pam. Well,
labeling.
authenticity, right? Like,
Well, it's that whole like, if anyone sort of, and again, it's that feeling of like connectedness and uh like this type of inclusionary
mm,
love energetic space that you are.
that is
That,
so true to me. Like, true. I
yes.
know this so deeply in my being that I can be that.
Hmm.
Like, it's so rare for me to be in any kind of head space or heart space where I don't feel deeply connected to, equal to all of life, like all of life, like whether it's a homeless man coming to talk to me on the side of the street about needing money for alcohol, and we can talk about alcoholism. Like, there's not a cell in my body that judges myself to be better than
Right.
anybody in any situation,
I agree.
because I know that to be true because I've experienced, like when we talked about meditation the first week, about how, when I meditate, I go into this deep place where I experience this oneness. Like, I've been there. So like once you've been there, and I go there, every day, pretty much when I meditate, like I don't forget the truth that we're connected and that we are all one, and that if something is hurtful to one of us, it's hurtful to all of us.
Hmm.
And so because I do that every day, it keeps me grounded in that knowing.
Yeah.
And that is so true. And I know that anything that is ego, that is Pam as this almost 40-year-old blonde girl, I still feel like a girl who, wrote a book, and like I didn't do any of that. Like I don't take any credit, right, for anything that I've done. I feel really proud and good about my work and about like my dedication and all of that. But like I don't take any credit because like I didn't do any of this in a vacuum, right? Like if we really think about what's true, everything that I know, I learned from someone else. Every practice that I've done, I've learned from or was inspired by someone else. Like, I don't take any credit for anything. And then conversely, when something not so good happens, I take full credit for that because I want to own that opportunity to grow.
Yes.
So my ego would be like, oh, no, no, that wasn't me.
So
That was someone else that caused that train wreck. But like, no, in some way or shape or form, I was involved in that. So I take full ownership and full responsibility, which allows me to grow So that's saying, shut up, ego. I'm not going to listen to you. I take full ownership for this train wreck. And then
Mhm.
conversely, anything good that happens, my ego wants to be like, me, 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 me. I'm like, fuck that. Nuh-uh. Like that was everybody that's ever touched me, that's ever given me love, that I've ever been inspired by, every book I've ever read. That's the wisdom coming through me right now. I don't take any credit for any of that. So that's another way of talking about, well, what is ego at work? Like the
Mhm.
ego is the part of you that wants to take credit for good stuff and blame others for not
Yeah.
good stuff, that
Yeah.
wants to identify, whether you're good enough, and the separateness being better than others.
Yeah. And if we talk about just to go on from that, the experience. So if people are watching this going, okay, well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great, Pam. Thanks.
Thanks. So
Cool.
now I'm really in my
What the fuck do
ego.
I do with
It's
it?
clear now.
You know what I mean? So
And
it's
that's
like,
okay. You are where you
and
are.
to speak to the experience of growing from that and how painful that can be,
Yeah.
and how scary that can be. Depends on the person
Humbling.
and what comes up and what is triggered in each of us
Terrifying, in fact.
uniquely. Yeah,
Terrifying.
like the grips of the ego, the hooks in our psyche and soul that has. So when
Mm.
those come out, it fucking
Talk about
hurts.
vulnerable.
So it's painful. I say this from experience, of course, because
Same.
growth is just can be excruciating and terrifying. So I say this so that if anyone is feeling that, if anyone is in the experience and going this and questioning, is this right? Or is this growth? Is this positive for me?
Feels
What
so
does it
scary.
feel
Feels so
like
painful. Yeah.
when you clear ego or choose forward? Like, what does that actually experience? What does that experience feel like? It's fucking tough.
I
And
can tell you, I
then you live
remember.
through it.
Yeah. No, I
That's the key,
remember.
is like you live through it. And that's where the freedom on the other side is. So it's not just that I'm like, oh, we should be in pain all the time. We should be freaking out all the time. It's that we
We move
grow,
through it.
we feel the fucking pain and terror. And then on the other side, we're released. So that's what we're working for. That's why growth. Why do we fucking care about growth? Who cares? What do we get? Well, that's what we get. We get that bigger blissful freedom from doing the work to move through shedding that stuff, feeling the hooks come out, healing the wound for real, and then going forward. Sounds very generic, but like,
No, that's where you get deeper creativity and vision and love and laughter and all that stuff. Like all the
yeah.
good stuff is on the other side, because everything you just described, those are all blocks, right? Those are blocks from like our brilliance to being able to flow through us.
Yeah.
And everything you just talked about, I remember like it was yesterday. I had a therapy session. I sat down with my therapist and she was like, all right, Pam, tell me who you are. It was like early on in our working together. She said, tell me who you are. And I was like, okay, well, and I start going through the list of labels of like all the
Yeah.
things, and I'm nice, I'm kind, I help others whenever I can, like all the things. And she was like, okay, she's like, all that's great. Like all that stuff, everything you just said is like wonderful. And she's like, but that's like not who you really like are, right? And I was like, and the way she said it, this one coach therapist I worked with, like she just somehow like pierced me. And
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, oh my God. And I got it, that like all those things, I built this like beautiful scaffolding
Yeah.
around my like vulnerable stuff, like my survival mechanisms or
Yeah.
like mode of operating, right? Like I'm good enough as long as I
Yeah.
am kind, I help others, I
Yep.
work really hard, like all those things, like that. Cause like literally if you'd asked me and she asked me who I was, that's how I defined myself. Like
Yeah.
there were labels, but then there was also like my qualities, like my
Yeah.
characteristics. I thought that's who I was.
Yeah.
And she shattered that in one fell swoop. And then the session ended and I had to go home. And I was like, Roger, you can't talk to me for many hours because right now I don't know who I am. And I feel like I'm like in that outer space movie, like where you're like untethered and you're like terrified because you don't like, you're just flying through outer space without any tethering. And
Yeah.
I was like having a full on panic attack for like 6 hours. And I just kind of like, and then like,
Yeah.
and then it passed and I could just feel and be a deeper knowing of my essence that had a lot of gunk in it, like a lot of fear and a lot of like pain still from my childhood and relationships. And like, and then I had to deal with all that shit. It was like,
Oh,
it
so
was like, it's like
annoying.
layers. But
So
I
annoying.
remember the terror. I had like hours of like full on terror.
Yep.
And that's like the layers, because these are all like our security blankets that we're
Mhm.
talking about peeling off. And then the rawness of not knowing what that is that's left and having to resensitize to it. It is a very uncomfortable. It's like the lobster, the lobster story, the lobster leaving its shell story. You know that story?
I don't think so. What
Oh
is
my
it?
God. We'll have
Yeah,
to
go.
find it and put it in the show notes, but it's like this great rabbi telling a story about a lobster and how when a lobster grows, it outgrows its shell and it has to shed this is so up your alley,
Yeah.
has to shed its shell. And so like it literally, this little vulnerable mushy being has to crawl out of its shell, hide behind a rock, pray and hope that it doesn't get fucking eaten in the meantime while it makes a new shell that's bigger and allows its growth. But that's
Right.
literally like what we have to do to shed this shell of our ego that is
Yep.
limiting us, because all these labels that we've assigned to who we
Yes.
are locks us in and limits our greatness, like
Yeah.
literally.
It's another quote that I love. I probably will say it, not again, right or wrong, whatever. The essence of the quote is that is and this is again like something I feel like I stand for, which again is the irony of this conversation. It's all part of
We
it.
keep getting to a deeper foundation
There's
of
lots of
truth.
irony in this conversation for sure, because
It's
absolutely, like
dialectic. All this is dialectic.
even the good stuff is ego. And so it's this idea that to challenge any idea, and like if we think like that we can't do something, like to really challenge anything that we think we can't do, like because my branding and just what I'm my way and how I've experienced life and been in life up to this point is very experiential and doing things. Obviously I've jumped out of airplanes lots and lots of times. I've
I never have, just
and that's totally cool.
Isn't that
It's not
funny?
for everybody.
Well, maybe one day.
Yeah, it's all good. It's not for everybody. It's fine. But like my point in sharing that is that that's sort of my frame that informs where I'm growing to, like, so one of the things that I feel like I've learned through my experiential journey is that I have a lot of evidence in my experiences, literally and relationally, that speak to our mind being wrong a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Like you can't believe what you think, in the sense that when I started skydiving, would I ever have thought that I would have been able to jump out of a plane 10,000 times, travel the world, and coach a bunch of people and meet a bunch of beautiful, wonderful people around the world? Why would that have ever crossed my mind as possible?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and it's not even like that, like that's just what happened in my life. That's just part of what has occurred. And so anyway, it informs that the things that we think we can't do, it always is worth looking at that and going, well, I don't know about that. And similarly, back to the ego conversation, anything we define ourselves as being is worth looking at, just in case,
Yeah,
So.
there's like a story in yoga too. It's like when you peel away all the labels, like you are the same person, the same being, that was born as a baby, right? And we're gonna hopefully grow old and wrinkly and gray, and that's still gonna be us. Like we are this deeper witnessing of life, right? And so when we put labels on ourselves, that's so limiting.
So limiting.
And we talk about all the time, our limiting beliefs. And like you were just saying, the things that we think we can't do.
Yeah.
Another way of saying that is calling out our limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
I mean, like, why are we going to allow ourselves to have those? Not to say, like I always say too, it's like, I do believe that we can do anything. We may need a lot of help. It may take several lifetimes, like we may need a lot of tools. We may need, who knows? But I really, really, really believe with my deepest being that anything is possible. And if you look, like you said, the evidence, like if you look like 100 years ago, if people looked at what we now have technology wise, it's like magic. People are like, what? It's like magic. And the way that the way that I always say, like, I do believe in magic, because like when you define magic, magic is something that happens where there's no like logical way that it could happen. Like there's nothing in our logical thinking, everything that we know about logic and science and physics that would support it actually happening and being so. And yet just in our lifetime alone, the number of technological advances, like using quantum physics, like I don't know
Yeah.
how much you know about quantum physics, but anything that uses quantum physical science
Mm-hmm.
is basically magic, because the
Yeah.
rules of quantum physics, like you can be in two places at once. The second you observe something, you shift it. So
Yeah.
when we talk about how we look at things, like
Mm-hmm.
why it doesn't make any sense that just by thinking something is possible or isn't possible, it doesn't make any sense that that would actually change the probability of something happening. But
Mm-hmm.
quantum physics actually shows us why that is so. Because
Mm-hmm.
just by looking at something a certain way, you actually change that thing, which makes no logical sense that by me looking at you right now, I just changed you. But it's
Yeah.
like, woo!
This
But
is
like,
why
but
I want to hang
that's
out with you.
quant. And if you don't understand that, if you're curious about any of that, like you could,
Yes.
there's a Netflix documentary, I think it was like a Nova PBS thing about hacking. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
whole segment about quantum computers
Okay.
and quantum code breaking.
Cool.
And those are two examples, like hard science, that if it doesn't, people always say, like, if
Yeah.
quantum physics doesn't blow your mind, you don't
Mm-hmm.
understand it. But those are two specific examples of things being used right now in technology
Mm-hmm.
that completely defy anything that we base our moment to moment view of life on. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
that just by looking at something, you change it. But that's what
Yeah.
science shows us. And
Yeah.
so, like, let's use that in our life, that by looking at ourself a certain way, our ego, right? By thinking
Mm-hmm.
about ourself a certain way, we actually change our being, change
Yeah.
our manifestation. So let's look at ourselves in the most broadest, most positive, most kind of cheering
Mm-hmm.
ourselves on,
Yeah.
patient, open way, because that makes things more possible. It doesn't make it
Yeah.
definite that it's going to happen. It's all
Yeah.
subtle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to change, big major, like me thinking that I can fly isn't going to mean that I can jump off my roof and suddenly fly. It's more
Right.
subtle than that. We need to be smart, but like there's realness to this. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just woo woo. Like quantum physics shows how it works.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, this is the like history, for example. We can say that all the time. Like tons and tons and tons of this is never possible. No way would that ever be possible. That's how many times that occur. It's
You've
all
watched
of time.
The Genius series on Netflix, right? You've watched
I've
that.
watched
Some
not
of
all of
them.
it, but some of it. Yeah.
I mean, every single one of
Hmm.
those is an example of
Yeah.
like, what? Like, what?
Totally.
Like,
Totally.
and here you have people doing things that everybody would have said is not possible.
Hmm.
And again, it's like, aha, like, aha. Was that, yeah, Princess
Aha.
Bride, aha.
Coming
Billy
to
Crystal.
America.
Or, oh, yes, Coming to America and Princess Bride, Billy
Oh
Crystal, right?
yeah. Yes,
Step
that's
on storming the castle.
right. Yeah. Rum raisin.
Oh,
Like, oh God, we could go on and on
on
and
and
on.
on. That's why I love you, among other
Oh,
many, many
I
reasons.
feel like I was gonna say something else. What were you
Sorry. It'll
saying?
come back. It'll come
No,
back.
no. If it's good, it'll come back.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking. I think my brain always goes to how can people take this and use it? How can
Yeah.
people take our insight and us waxing poetic here for consumption and help and usefulness? Like, how
Yeah.
can
So,
people take this?
so
What would you
when we talk about mindfulness, right? Like,
say?
I know we've said this many times, I'm going to keep saying it. I define mindfulness as paying attention to your attention. So being
Hmm.
aware of what you're paying attention to, being aware of what thoughts you follow and believe to be true,
Yeah.
and what thoughts you're like, nope, not that one. Right.
Hmm.
Because our brain doesn't stop having all these observations. Like, our brain is very much kind of on autopilot, and it has all these thoughts, has all these observations. And so it's our job to start being extremely discerning about which thoughts we believe and allow to kind of follow,
Yeah.
and which thoughts we're like, nope, not that one. Nope,
Which is
that thought.
tough.
Yeah,
Which takes practice. That's
absolutely.
definitely a skill set, a practice to. And it's like, okay, how do you shift? Oh, I notice a damaging thought, as it
Hmm.
were. So what
Hmm.
do I do with that? Okay, well, I'm prepared before that. So first I notice that thought. I
Hmm.
go, okay, that's something. And oh, I feel through it, whatever. And I lose some emotional energy and some time to feeling badly about whatever that thought is driving. Then you go back and go, okay, I'm going to prepare myself when I feel this next, because it will come back up theoretically if we don't
Hmm.
practice and work to
Hmm.
reprogram our minds, like, so I would say to have a thought in the hopper ready for
Yeah,
the next time that comes,
let me ask you, like, when I say to you, because I'm really genuinely curious, if I say
Mhm.
to you, deciding which thoughts to believe to be true. What does that mean to you? Like, is that something that like resonates at all? Like, do you have that kind of like awareness of you have a thought and you decide whether or not you're going to believe that thought? Like, is that something that does that mean anything to you? Or is that like, what?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect question for the ego conversation, is that I think it first comes from believing and recognizing the separateness from our thoughts,
Uh-huh.
that we are not our
Yes.
thoughts,
Yes.
such that we can be tricked by them,
Mm-hmm.
that they are needing assessment.
Right.
All of them. We may decide to keep some.
Hopefully.
It's, yeah, you
Because our
know,
brain
like,
is a really great tool that we want to use and figure out how
yeah,
to use, right?
yeah. So like because it's not like, oh, we want to look at every thought because every thought's all fucked up because it's from the ego. No, I mean, no. Obviously, we're making conscious choices. So if we're recognizing that, a thought is separating us from connectedness, from love, from whatever it is that we want our lives to be centered around, or, excuse me, our life experience to be, or our relationships to look and feel like, you know what I mean? So like, I think it's first recognizing that when we have a thought or an emotional charge around a thought, to recognize that that isn't us.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and getting that there's something to do there. I think a lot of people are just unconscious even at the start. And I know I
I
was
was too. Yeah. And I
that.
love these conversations because it's been a while that I've been in this practice,
Mhm.
and it's great to, bounce off like different stages of the practice.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, and go back to the skydiving metaphor. It's like I just wrote a column about this, actually, not this month but last month, about it was more for like experienced skydivers, like in the realm of personal growth, as it were. You are more experienced, not to label you, but meaning to say you've been in a rigorous yoga practice, meditative practice, growth, committed to growth. Same here. I've been committed to growth for a long time, and it, I think, takes conscious effort to think back and go, well, what was it like? What did I actually feel when I was first
What was
starting
my
to
experience? Like
skydive?
thinking about experience. Yeah.
Yeah, what was my life experience like when I first was having breakthrough in terms of growth? And, like, what was that like? What did I have to deal with and navigate? So that, and I say this again, just because we're out to create content that is helping other people
Yeah.
at
This isn't
whatever
just for
level.
us feeding our ego.
Oh my
Clearly.
God. I feel like every week I'm going to be like, oh my God, it's hard for me to get here. But I'm
I
not going
know
to,
we're all
I'm not going to say it every time. But
try.
anyway,
We'll try.
um, yeah. So that's why I take it back to, well, how can people implement this? Because the last thing I would want is people to watch something like this. And I know that I can't control how people look at us, and that's okay with me. I'm willing to take that risk, per se.
Yeah, or
That's,
accept that reality
yeah,
that we're not going to be for everyone. Some people are going to be
right.
really annoyed by us. Our
Totally.
cheery, bubbly,
Oh my
blonde, happy
God.
laughter shit, right? That's really fucking annoying to someone who wants to be
Oh my
miserable, first of all.
God.
But they're not still with us. So that's okay. We lost
So
those people a while
annoying.
ago.
So annoying.
They didn't even fucking click. It's okay.
And it's all good. I mean, because I remember even myself, like, taking in people, and this is sort of, but anyway, that's why I keep going back to how-tos,
Like the
and
practice.
what can
Yeah.
people take as a practice? What are starting points? What are, those types of things that people can take and use and start to implement for themselves? Because implementation, I think, is the biggest question mark for so many
Yeah.
people. How the freak do you do it?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think just the simple question of asking, like, who am I? Which I think at some point, we probably spent some time on. I think most people go through at least one phase of their life where they're like, who
Mhm.
am I? Whether it was in college or whatever. And then at some point you maybe get like a strong enough scaffolding around that where you feel like you don't need to waste time worrying about that anymore, right? You're like, I've got other shit to do. My life is very busy. I've got things to do. I'm not going to spend time thinking about or worrying about whether I know who I really am. Right? Because that's like can be incredibly distracting, like an existential crisis in the middle of like having to have a family and like live a life.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to do that like on a daily basis because
Right.
it is incredibly vulnerable and it like takes you in that moment. It's almost like, you know, And I remember I was a volleyball player. You were a skydiver. I was a volleyball player, skier. But in volleyball, when I wanted to learn an overhand serve, and I was really resistant to it because I was like, look, I've got my sidearm serve, like, great. I can ace that mother, like, 9 times out of 10. Like, why am I going to start doing overhand where I'm going to shank so many of them? It's like, I'm good enough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And my coach, I never forget it, Coach Berg, wherever you are, he was like, Pam, in life, when you want to level up with your skills, you have to be willing to have that discomfort of taking 2 steps backwards
Yes.
in order to be able to take those 5 steps forward.
Yeah.
And so you need to embrace that period where you're not going to be as on your game and not going to be as awesome.
Yes.
But that's exactly what's going to enable you to take that big leap
Yes.
forward to that another level of greatness.
Totally.
So same thing here. I think the starting practice of questioning, like, wait, who am I? Do I really know who I am? Like, what is the deepest layer of meanness, of beingness, of the witness of my life that I know that I can connect to? How do I define myself? Like, asking those questions, it's, again, like, great, thanks for going to have everybody have an existential crisis after this. But like, that's the work. Like, you have to, that's where you go to get there.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. So if we talk about it from a life coaching perspective, because that's my work, is that I'm a coach, I'm a life coach, as it were. That's a whole different conversation about that. If I had to talk about, like, I always say it's an ascending sine wave, because it is a sine wave. If people expect it to be, oh, I'm going to start, this is what happens. This is a very typical trajectory when someone starts life coaching. They're like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm changing my life. They've got a teammate they can trust. It's legit. It's legit energy. I've been there myself, and it's awesome. So they're like, yeah, but then they're like, oh, fuck, this is hard work. Oh, God. Oh, like they're this, like, low, this dip.
The messy middle, is
then
Brene
they get
Brown
through
says.
it, and they've building some new habits, and they see sort of more what's possible. And I say they, and I am including myself.
Totally. Like, myself too. I'm messy.
So if we talk about it from the ego perspective, just to keep it on point for this particular conversation, is that we typically start really in these low levels of energy where we're in sort of victim mode and anger. Like, those are those low
blaming,
catabolic, blaming, all of those things, high ego. Then we shed that and we bumble around, not necessarily having the skills, because we're used to being down here. So this is what we're really good at. We're good at being in victim mode. We're good at being angry. We're good at being triggered and not knowing what to do, because we've never practiced that. So I say that a lot about, like, that. It makes sense.
It's like there's comfort in those rituals, right? It's comfortable.
It's comfortable, but it also, if we talk about it from a skills perspective, it makes sense we wouldn't be good at the skills that are getting us forward from that. So there's that dip of building those new skills. Then we're like, yay, we're going to construct this new positive scaffolding, which is a different version of ego, right? The whole, I'm a good person, I'm nice, all that shit. Like, I
take full responsibility for myself.
I say that all the time. I'm nice. Right?
Like, God damn it, I'm nice. Why are you such an asshole?
Yeah. Like, the comedy is not lost on me. Okay.
I know.
Then there's that other. So if we talk about going up and again, not that that's even optimal, like, oh, we want to be sitting in a mountaintop all day. That's not necessarily the goal, but to transcend even that, then next constructed ego gets us to that more deeply connected, blissful place. So in terms of my work, that's sort of the trajectory that people go on with me.
And just to add to that, which is really important for people to understand, when we talk about that trajectory, it's also like about a proportion of time that you are still in the ego versus you're out. Like, if you look at someone like Steve Jobs, right? Like, Steve Jobs, kind of one of the biggest visionaries, really into kind of enlightenment, but he had many aspects of his personality that were not, right? Like, we're whole beings, and our kind of goal, at least for me and my work, is to practice being in that kind of ascended, aware, connected, more inner peace, because that's where you have infinite creativity, infinite love, infinite bliss, infinite inspiration, all the infinite laughter. Like, that's that. But, like, I don't necessarily think that at any point in my life I'm going to be there all the time. Like there's
Right.
certain modes that I get into that I'm more likely to be at a lower level. And that's just where I'm at with my practice. And so like, I think we look at Steve
Yeah.
Jobs, he was more in his ego when he was, defending his work at Apple, right? But then he'd be in the flow of creating the work, but then he'd be triggered back into being an asshole to someone who like threatened, you hear all these stories about him, against all stories. I don't judge Steve Jobs,
Totally.
obviously, but it's like, there's a dynamicness.
Yeah.
Like none of us are probably in our lifetime going to become Buddha, where we
Right.
like, no matter what, like someone could come. And it's like, again, too, it's like, I love Dalai Lama. Cause like, I mean, these are my people, right? Like people that inspire me.
My
But even like
peeps.
he's like, you get bit by someone asked him was like, if you get bit by a mosquito, what do you do? He's like, I slap it. It's like, although I was actually filming and I think I got bit by mosquitoes the other day. I was like meditating and I like didn't slap them because I was like on film, like pretending to meditate, but I could feel myself getting bites. But anyway, but so the point is like this shedding of the ego, depending on any given moment, it's such a flowing practice.
Yeah.
And there are certain modes that we'll be in where we're more likely to be triggered, more likely to drop down out of this kind of higher level of awareness. We all, like I say too, like some of the time we'll be in hero and then something will happen and we'll get triggered and we'll drop down to ego. Some of the time we'll be up in this kind of thoughts become things, power of positive thinking, like our thoughts are as important as our action, but then something will happen and we'll be like, fuck this, it doesn't work. And like, you'll just go back to bulldozing your way through things and not, honoring kind of the power of positive thinking or honoring being of service, the next level up from, this shedding of the ego is it's, this oneness and, being of service is really what calls to you and the passion. But then something will happen where someone's an asshole and you're not in this fully enlightened place and you'll drop back down into, that lower level of judgment and stuff. So there's no kind of completeness about any of this practice. It's like a moment to moment practice. And that's why, like I said earlier, I'm at this place in my practice where I'm dealing with my aversion to anything that seems like ego. Like that's kind of where I am in my practice and I struggle with it. I don't like doing videos. I don't like, doing anything that seems like it's about me, that seems like I think I'm better than anyone else, or I think that like I can feel when people think that, or my brain creates this idea that people think that. I don't know which one's true.
Right.
But I have an aversion to that. And that's where I'm at in my practice because it's bullshit. It's like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
Right.
But that's where I'm at in my practice. And I am working really hard at it. And I'm grateful for your friendship and support. But it's for all of us, it's a practice and it's a journey. And it's just about trying to level up as often as possible, as much as possible. It's not at all like ever like you get there and then you're there.
Right. Well,
there's no there.
I like to add that for people too, is that, and this is sort of in the realm of the energy language that I tend to use, but there's this like the level 5, like level 6, 7 is like the more enlightened levels. And that's a whole different thing. I can describe it another time, but I tend to shoot for, and this is where I'm at in my practice in terms of like, and this is where I'm like excited about starting to shoot for the more spiritual levels, like to give myself space for a more spiritual practice, a less actionable practice, if that makes sense. I've been very action driven for my whole life, as most achievers, type A people are, which is great. It's cool. We do lots of great shit. So one of the things that has worked for me to like continue to pull myself up energetically is to work and operate and live from the frame of win-win. So like that is like everybody wins. It's not necessarily we're all connected, spiritual bliss, nothing can touch me. So it's not the highest level of peace and bliss and joy and all that stuff. But it's a useful level for people. Again, I'm saying this more thinking about who,
like a mutual beneficial kind of framework,
is like, that's something kind of that's easy to grab onto with our mind. That will help us feel safer in the world, feel more productive, feel better about ourselves and our results. It feels better energetically and emotionally, and it gives us a strong base from which to, I think, build a spiritual
I
practice.
totally agree. And I remember really well being in business, even as a young person, and intrinsically feeling that it's like, I didn't want to partner with someone where it wasn't going to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
I didn't ever want to go into a negotiation and trying to like screw someone and get the best possible terms where like
Absolutely.
they weren't going to have a sustainable partnership with me. Like I just take all their money and then they're out of business. Like
Yeah.
that never felt right. That, and that, like
Mhm.
you said, it's a higher mentality than, you know, a lot of people are. Because if someone's coming from a place of scarcity,
Yep.
they're not going to be thinking about sustainability for both partners. They're
Yeah.
just thinking about getting as much as they can for themselves so they survive.
Yep.
Right. And hopefully we want to be rising ourselves up out of the scarcity mentality, which our ego is very much, you know, locked in
Yeah.
often to that scarcity, if not scarcity for survival, scarcity of good enough and love. Like another example is like, I remember having, and I still recently, like a friend, a really good friend told me about a new friend they made. Like imagine you call me like, Pam, I made this awesome new friend.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever. My brain locked in the like ego scarcity mindset would be like, well, does that mean that our friendship isn't as special? Like we're not as good friends, right? But like that's still the kind of silly, right, thoughts that my brain still has from like being 6. You know, like you made a new friend and you're not going to play as much, you know, like shit. But like again, and if you can switch to this mutually beneficial, like you made a new friend, awesome. I'm sure any friend that you make, I'm going to freaking love.
Yep.
I can't wait to see how there's even more synergy now, you know, like that shifting, which applies in our personal lives, it applies in our professional lives.
Yep.
But I love that, thinking about that mutually beneficial, like win-win, like that's a real, like that's a more elevated, mature way to climb out of that scarcity mindset, which our mind is going to want to like keep feeling, right? And evolve. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, girl, as always, we could continue ad infinitum.
I love you.
This is good. I say we stop here because
let's do it. Thanks, everybody.
We could easily talk for 18 hours longer.
Yeah, you rock.
And,
thank you so much.
I actually encourage people, just to put this out there, if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, drop us a line. You know, I'm Mel at melaniecurtis.com, Pam at goldevolution.com. Drop us a line. We're open to discussion. We want to hear from you guys.
We love chatting.
We want to create, I mean, again, we're throwing paint on the wall with this sucker. We want to create value for you guys. So if you have feedback or ideas of what you'd want to hear us kind of jam on, definitely let us know.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Love you, Mel.
Love you.
You're awesome. I love you. I'm so grateful for you.
You're awesome.
You're awesome.
Holy shit.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I have my lights blasting on me.
I have just one on today, but I think it
fine. Looks great. Oh no,
it's
so great.
So much. I mean, when I can have lights, obviously it's like night and day. I actually wanted to look to see, because so often I'm like in the city and like traveling with my bags.
You have a traveling light?
Yeah. They must make them where you can just like clip on. Or even if I could just play with, like Jesse has like a little reading light that like spins all around. I can just point it on my.
They've got to have one that clips on your laptop or something.
Yeah, they must, because it makes such a difference. Like the last 2, I've been like, okay.
Doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah,
Again, what I love too about stuff like that is that people will witness our growth as a team and see how we improve. I mean, shit. I don't know how many Art of Charm episodes I've listened to where they're like embarrassed about what they used to do. And I think that you never create anything if you're waiting to be.
No, and that's what you and I both, obviously it's all like our core principles, like start before you're ready, surrender before it's perfect. Like you would never get anything fucking done if like, you didn't. And you have to embrace the mess, embrace the imperfection. It's all opportunity, and like
in all areas of life.
Yeah.
So good. But anyway, what do you got on the rest of the day?
I think I'm going to like tackle cleaning my closet and Talia's closet, because Jessie is at a play date. I just dropped me off in the city.
Nice.
And Talia and I are home, and she's going to camp on Sunday. So we have to like start packing for camp. Okay. Roger is on a plane to Canada. Originally we were going to be traveling this week. So it's kind of like found a found week, which I'm
Yeah.
super fucking psyched about.
Nice.
And I'm going to go into the city sometime. We're going to go, I think Wednesday, we're going to go to Great Adventure, take the kids to Great
Fun.
Adventure. I don't know if you like roller coasters, but we love roller coasters.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Well, I'm prepping for, I have my last skydiving job that I have on the calendar, which is exciting.
Cool.
I have one other skydiving commitment at the end of September, which isn't a job. I'm not like getting paid for it or anything. It's just supporting one of my girlfriends.
Yay.
And I'm doing this charity event at the ranch, doing 25 jumps in a day on Peter's birthday. Oh God, I haven't even responded to you for that.
Oh, that's okay. That's the other thing. Thank you for reminding me. I have to do that this week too. I have to print out all those things and cut them.
What is it that you need? I'm writing it down.
Any kind of like birthday message. What literally I'm doing, I'm printing out, I'm copying and pasting. So it's all on one page. And then Talia doesn't know this yet, but Talia's going to help me.
It's going to be awesome.
It's like, honestly, that's like so up her alley. Like she's done this for me, just like my last year's Mother Day, she made all these quotes on little pieces of paper and put them in a jar.
That's awesome.
So we're just going to cut out everybody's message and like put on little pieces of paper and put them in a box or a jar with like some sort of sparkle something, and then just give it to him. And so it's thoughtful, and it's not going to be too much work, and it wasn't my idea. So I don't take any fucking credit. I happen to be doing the work behind it, but I love working hard. I know you do too. It's like, I love working hard.
It helps me manage the mind.
It's like priming the pump.
It helps me manage the mind.
Yeah.
Which my mind is very powerful.
Yeah. And it's like, it's a flow of life. Like working is a flow of life, and not letting our brain judge whether the work is good enough or it's the right work. Like if you feel inspired to do it, fucking do it. It doesn't, and that's, I think, it's one of the things that when we're in our brain too much, we like are so judgmental around where we're putting in our work.
Everything.
It's like, does it feel good? Does it spark joy? I'm like, yeah, it fucking sparks joy for me to make this shit for Peter. And I think he fucking deserves it. Yep. So I'm like, it feels good to do it. So I'm doing it. And, sometimes I'm out, weeding the garden or pruning the flowers or writing the blog. And like, I think what such an important lesson for all of us is just to be like, don't judge the work. Just does the work feel right? Does it spark joy in your heart? Then do it. Don't judge it. And we judge, like, is this really in alignment with my greater mission and what I'm trying to achieve? Fucking don't judge it. Just love it. Do the work. Don't sit on your ass. Like, just work.
I'm like,
tired. You work so fucking hard. Shut the fuck up.
Oh God. Oh no, it's good. It's funny. I've always had a battle with like, this is one of the things I learned in Vermont. Like I always used to identify with being strong, being courageous, right? I still identify with that, but like
core value.
It was useful. It was a useful practice for me then to allow that not to be who I am. So again, like back to the ego thing, it's like so it's just that back and forth between working hard and then being like, I'm going to rest. I don't have
rest.
to.
The rest
I don't
is
have
super,
to
again,
grow.
it's the sine wave, right? The sine wave, work really hard, then rest, work really hard and rest. Don't like work half-ass and never rest.
Exactly.
Work really fucking hard, rest. And
exactly.
also too, using your core values as like guideposts to keep you kind of in alignment, but that's not who you are. They're just like these guides. Guides to your being, but that's not who you are. You are life itself. Like you are life itself. You are light and love. And then you have these core values that keep you in your beam of lightness.
It's so fucking true.
Love you. It's so fucking true. And if we just let ourselves shine, just shine, motherfucker. Like just get out of your way and just shine in your courageous core value contained beam of light. Be a fucking powerful laser fireworkness shit.
I love using the camera for this. Look at that. Look how cool that looks.
See, we should still be recording.
I am recording.
Oh, perfect.
We're
totally bloopers.
I'll probably cut it and be like, you got to just do the after shit with us.
Like the outtakes, Melanie and Pam outtakes.
It's like, we are a bit lighter. Notice we're a bit lighter.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Our zany cursing.
The practice, girl. I love you.
I love you. You are just an angel. Honestly. I hate the definition of an angel to be like perfect. Like this, I love the definition of an angel, that an angel just shows up and is a worker of light and love. Like you just, wherever you are, you help when you can, you shine love. Like that is an angel, You are an angel.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about a John Mulaney sketch. He's a comedian that I love. He talks about the New York Post and that the highest honor or the highest label in the New York Post is an angel. And what an angel is a child who has died. He's like, no, you are an angel or you are a tot. And if you're a tot, you are simply
still alive.
You are simply an angel who is still alive.
Still alive.
Yeah.
That's hysterical. Oh my God.
Anyway, all right. I love you.
Anyway,
have an amazing day.
I love you.
Picture that in closet just because I want to see it. And
yes, both mine and Talia's. I will let her know that we're sending you pictures. I love you, sweetie. Have a great day. Kick ass.
Bye.